Hi, everyone. I have a secret. Who wants to hear my secret?
What's your secret?
Today is not just Purim, but it is a very special day because it's Rabbi Sobo's birthday. Happy birthday. Maybe I'll give her 2 candy bars. We'll see. Well, I hope are people still coming in from the hallway? I think so. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start because this will go on for a long time. I love that there's so many of you who are dressed up in costume. We are going to have a parade of costumes in just a moment. A parade of costumes. So if there's anyone else in the hallway, let's grab them in because we want to make sure we have all of our costumed guests with us. A few more coming. Okay, name tags are good. Did you pass this up? Or? Okay. Yes.
I want a chocolate bar at the end.
When you come up, you can have them. As we're waiting for a few more people to arrive, just want to make a few little announcements. For those of you who are excited and interested in how this works when it comes to candy, yes, I said candy, I'm going to explain it to you. What? Why are they what? Oh, the chair's so swingy? Some people think they're comfortable. Yeah. And they make it easier to walk through when you go past them. So if you are interested in participating by, whenever we say Esther or Mordechai, who can tell me what they think we're going to do? Are we going to boo them? No. You guys know enough about that. All right, Ethan, what are we going to do? That's right. You guys are going to cheer. You can say yay, and we are going to shower you with sweets. That's right. Have you passed out the groggers?
I was going to wait till after the costume parade.
Okay. Groggers will be coming after the costume parade. Makes sense. A couple of rules. Please, if you don't have a bag, you can pick one up from us. So we're not running all over each other trying to catch our candy. And speaking of which, I prefer that we don't run at all. If you guys can stay in your places, in your seats, we will have plenty of candy coming around and showering you. If you do not want to be hit by any candy, adults might want to hear this, if you do not want to be hit by any candy, you may choose to be on the risers. That might be a better option for you. Consider yourself warned.
Remember, I swam.
Hi. Do you want a little bag? Okay. So we talked about what we do when we say Esther and Mordecai. What do we do when we say either Haman or Haman? Boo. All right. That sounds a little bit sad. Let's try and do this a little bit more enthusiastically. What do we do when we say Haman? That's right. Raise your voices. We want to drown out Haman's name, but again, we want to elevate and raise up our main characters who are our heroes. And who are their names again? It's another little test. Who's the woman that we are going to be celebrating? Esther and her cousin? Mordecai. Excellent. All right, we're going to go ahead with our parade of costumes. If you are dressed up like Queen Esther, if Queen Esther is who you are dressed up as, I invite you to come forward for your parade of costumes. The lone Esther. we do have an Old West theme, so maybe you're, the Lone Ranger, the Lone Esther, so all to you. Beautiful. And we are going to have you stay up here because you know exactly what to do, right? We're all going to get together and take a great big picture. So, any Queen Vashtis? Queen Vashti. Before there was an Esther, there was a Queen Vashti? No Queen Vashtis. All right. Do we have, I see some people who really like her. Do we have any Mordechais? Anyone dressed up as a Mordechai? No? How about King Ahasuerus? Oh, do we have Mordecai?
No, we just have.
Oh, no, just a bag. Okay, chocolate. King Ahasuerus? Anyone dressed up as a king? I see we are all in the favorite group of miscellaneous, right? Is there anyone else who is dressed up as a character like Haman? Any Hamans? Yes! We've got a Haman in the house. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Any other characters from our story? Anyone who dressed up as a Hamantashen? Anyone dressed up as a poppy seed? No? Okay. So I guess this is our largest group. We call this miscellaneous. If you are dressed up at all in a costume, trying to turn everything on its head like we do on Purim, come on up. You all get to have a round of applause, a chocolate bar, and a great big picture. Did you get one? You cannot have another. Here you go. Excellent. I don't know who James Rodriguez is. Ooh, you guys look good. I like it. You're welcome.
Where's Daddy? He's in here and he's taking
We're gonna get a picture.
That's okay. Do we have anyone else who is dressed in costume? We sure do. A lot of people from the Old West. Thank you. Oh. Anybody else? Are you sure? All right, let's try and gather together so we can get into a picture.
Look at the camera.
I love the
Pretty sure Matt, you are blocking.
always.
Here, come here.
It's that way. Okay. Now that we've done our parade of costumes, we have some groggers. Our groggers are there to help us so that when we say boo, it'll help us to drown out Haman's name even more. Haman's name. I said Haman. Boo. So if anyone wants to use a grogger, please go ahead and come over to our faithful cow and the cowboy. Now, parents, this can include you too. Groggers are not just for kids. Although, parents, you might be thinking, how am I going to make sure that this stays at Temple? You can start thinking of an exit plan now. Now, before we begin, as with everything that we like to do, this is celebrated by reciting some blessings. And it is actually a commandment that we are supposed to read the Megillah. Megillah means, of course, what? Does anyone know what Megillah means? Anyone? Megillah? In the back. A scroll. Excellent. Which is why I have this pretty little scroll. So we are going to read from our Megillah. First, join with me in the blessing. It will go through as a normal blessing formula for something that is a mitzvah, but the last three words are Al Nikra Megillah. Let's join together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah. And then we continue with the one that may sound familiar if you're used to lighting candles for Hanukkah. It ends with Sha'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. If that's too fast for you, you don't have to join in, but if it's familiar, now you know which one I'm talking about. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh, which is, blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who made miracles for our ancestors and for us. And then we have a third blessing, similar to Hanukkah. Who knows what the third one's going to be? For the first night, we usually say, Shehechianu. That's right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this day, which, in light of our Purim story, we realize is such a miracle. All right, are we ready? You're born ready? Okay, here we go. Remember, if I say Esther, and if I say Mordecai, and if I say Haman. You guys are so good. In the days of King Ahasuerus of Persia, who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Nubia, and occupied the royal throne in the fortress city of Shushan, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers. And for 180 days, he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom and the splendid glory of his majesty. At the end of this period, the king gave a 7-day banquet for all the people of Shushan. Royal wine was served in abundance, just like we'll have next door. And the rule for drinking was no restrictions. On the 7th day, after the king had had a lot of wine, he orders his attendants to bring Queen Vashti before him to display her great beauty to his public. But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command. And the king, even though he shouldn't have been, was furious. It doesn't really say that. He gathered together his closest advisors. What, he asked, shall be done to Queen Vashti for failing to obey the command of her king, Ahasuerus? One advisor was very concerned. That's right, very concerned. Queen Vashti has committed an offense not only against you, but against all men in your kingdom. That's right. Why, this very day, the ladies of the kingdom who have heard of the queen's behavior will act the very same way. There will be no end in sight. You should issue a royal edict that Vashti never again shall enter your presence. Let your majesty bestow the position of queen upon another who is more worthy than she. When the people of your realm hear this, all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike. The king liked this idea, and so it was done. Sometime afterward, the king's servant suggested, let us search the land, every province of your mighty kingdom, for the most beautiful young women for your majesty. Let them be assembled here in Shushan under strict supervision. Let them be made up beautifully when they parade one by one before you, and let the maiden who most pleases your majesty be queen instead of Vashti. We're getting to some of these good names now. The proposal pleased the king very much. Now it so happened that in the capital city of Shushan, there lived a Jew by the name of Mordecai, whose family had been exiled from the land of Israel. He lived in Shushan with his young cousin Esther, an orphan whom he had adopted as his own daughter. Esther was very beautiful. So when all the lovely young women in the kingdom were assembled at the king's palace, Esther was included. But she never told anyone that she was Jewish. Finally, the time came for Esther to go before the king, who immediately fell in love with her. He set the royal crown on her head and proclaimed her queen. He gave a great banquet in her honor. In fact, Esther made the king so happy that he ordered a tax cut for every family in his kingdom and even sent them all expensive presents. Her cousin Mordecai, meanwhile, he sat at the palace gate every day, waiting for word of Esther. One day, he overheard two of the king's guards plotting to murder Ahasuerus. He told his cousin, the queen, and she reported it to the king in Mordecai's name. The two men were caught and killed, and Mordecai's name and his brave deed were recorded in the king's diary. Now, King Ahasuerus had a trusted advisor named Haman, whose standing in the kingdom was higher than that of anyone except the king himself. And by royal order, everybody had to kneel and bow down to Haman whenever he passed by. But Mordecai the Jew, he sat every day at the palace gate, but refused to bow down. And when Haman saw that he would not kneel or bow low to him, he was furious. He was so angry, in fact, that he began plotting to do away with not just Mordecai, but with all of the Jews of Persia. To do this, Haman used the fortune-telling device of casting lots. Purim is the Persian word for lots, to foresee the best time to bring about the destruction of Persia's Jews. The Purim told him that he should choose a time that fell in the Jewish month of Adar. Haman then went to King Ahasuerus and said to him, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples in all the provinces of your realm, whose laws are different from those of any other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. And it is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate them. If it please you, your majesty, let an edict be drawn for their destruction, and I myself will put up 1,000 pieces of silver for the job, to be deposited in your royal treasury." The king, easy to please, agreed. He took his signet ring, a sign of royal favor, off of his own finger, and he gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said, "The money and the people are yours to do with as you see fit." Soon a decree was issued throughout the kingdom as Haman directed. The decree was to exterminate all the Jews, young and old, children and women, on a single day, on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and to seize everything they owned. When Mordecai learned of the royal decree to the Jews of Persia, he tore his clothes and he put on sackcloth and ashes as a sign of mourning. All the Jews in Shushan and all the Jews around the kingdom did the same. And Mordecai sent word to his cousin the queen, begging her to go to the king and plead for the lives of her people, the Jews. But remember, Esther had told no one that she was Jewish, so she was afraid to go to the king. She sent back word to her cousin, "Everybody knows that if any person enters the king's presence without having been summoned, he or she will be put to death. Only if the king extends the golden scepter may he live. And it has been 30 days since I was last summoned to visit the king." But Mordecai would not take no for an answer. He warned the queen, "Do not imagine that you of all the Jews will escape with your life by being in the king's palace. If you keep silent now, you will surely die. And who knows, maybe you have attained your royal position for just such a crisis. Her cousin's words convinced Esther to act. She sent back this answer to him: "Go, assemble all the Jews who live in Shushan and fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and nights, and I and my maidens will do the same. Then I shall go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I die, I die." So Mordecai went around the city and did just as Esther had commanded him. 3 days later, Esther, dressed in her finest royal robes, and stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace, where the king, sitting on his throne, could see her. As soon as he did, his heart went out to her. He extended the royal scepter to her, a sign that she could approach him without fear. "What troubles you, my queen?" the king asked her, "and what is your request? If you desire half the kingdom, it shall be yours." "If it please your majesty," Esther replied, "let your majesty and Haman come tonight to the wonderful feast that I have prepared for you." That night, as she supplied the men with food and wine, the king again asked Esther, "What is your wish?" "My wish," she replied, "is that you and Haman come again tomorrow night to another fine feast, which I shall prepare for you." Haman headed home happy and lighthearted until he once again ran into Mordecai the Jew, who sat at the palace gate, and once again he did not bow down to him. When Haman got home, he told his wife and his friends all about his evening. He bragged about how the queen gave a feast and invited only the king and himself. And he bragged, "Tomorrow, too, I have invited to join her and the king." Yet, all this means nothing to me every time I see that Jew at the palace gate refusing to bow down to me, that Mordecai. His wife and all his friends said to him, "We know what would cheer you up. Build a stake 50 feet high outside your door. Ask the king to have this man killed. Then you can have a fun time at the queen's dinner." Haman really liked that idea, and he set about planning his demise. Later that night, the king was unable to sleep, so he got up and he read a book. He read his own royal diary. He read in there about how Mordecai had saved his life by denouncing the traitors who had plotted against him, and he realized he had not yet rewarded him. So he searched the palace for someone to advise him on how to do just that, and the only one in the palace at the time was Haman himself. The king asked him, "What should be done for a man whom the king desires to honor?" Haman, of course. He thought the king was talking about him, so he really wanted to come up with something special. "Let's see," he said to the king. "Let this man wear royal robes, ride on a royal horse, and wear a royal crown. Let him be paraded on horseback throughout the city, and let it be declared, this is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Great idea. See, he really likes those ideas. This king, he said, "Let's waste no time. You take the royal robes and the royal horse and the royal crown, and you, Haman, yourself, will lead the parade." Nobody? "But you will give all of this to Mordecai the Jew." Such was Haman's humiliation, that he would be forced to honor the man he so despised. He did just as the king commanded him. He put the royal robes and the royal crown on Mordecai, and he paraded him around the city on the king's own horse, declaring, "This is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor." No sooner had Haman arrived home than the guards arrived to take him to the second banquet that Queen Esther had prepared. So he and the king came to feast with the queen a second time, and happily full of wine and food, the king again asked, "What is your wish, Queen Esther?" "It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? If you desire half the kingdom, it shall be yours." The queen replied, "Your Majesty, please, this is what I ask. My wish is that you spare my life, and my request is that my people be spared as well. For a man in your kingdom has determined that I and my people are to be destroyed." King Ahasuerus was stunned. He was furious, for he loved Esther very much. "Who is this man?" the king demanded. "Who would dare do such a thing?" "The adversary and enemy," she replied, "is this evil Haman." Haman cringed in terror before the king and the queen. The king was furious, and to add to his anger, one of his guards informed him, "You should know, Your Majesty, that Haman has raised a stake in front of his house 50 feet high, and on it he intends to impale the body of the Jew who saved your life, Mordecai." The king wasted no time. "Then such shall be done to Haman instead." So the guards killed him on the stake that he had meant for Mordecai. Finally, Esther had revealed to the king that she herself was Jewish, and he loved her no less for it. She also told the king all about Mordecai, her beloved cousin, who cared for her and who also had saved the king's life. King Ahasuerus rewarded Mordecai a second time. He took that same signet ring, which he had removed from Haman's hand, and gave it to him as a sign of royal protection and power. But the rest of the Jews of Persia were still in danger, for Haman's royal decree had already been sent out. And once a decree is written and signed, it cannot be revoked. King Ahasuerus said to Esther and Mordecai, "You must write a new decree. Write it in my name and seal it with a signet ring so that it too cannot be revoked." So Mordecai summoned all of the king's scribes and sent out this decree to all the 127 provinces of the kingdom, from India to Ethiopia. And this decree said, "The king has permitted the Jews of every city to assemble and fight for their lives. If anyone attacks you, you have the right to fight back against your enemies." And so it came to pass that on the 13th day of the month of Adar, on the very day that Haman decreed, the very day he decreed that the Jews would die, the very opposite happened. Throughout the kingdom, Jews gathered forces against their enemies. Hundreds of their enemies were killed in the capital city of Shushan, thousands more throughout the kingdom. Among them were the 10 sons of the wicked Haman. Once they had defeated their enemies, the Jews of the provinces rested on the 14th day of Adar and made it a day of feasting and merrymaking. Does anyone know what day today is? 14th of Adar. The Jews of the capital city of Shushan fought for another day and finally rested and celebrated on the 15th of Adar. And so it was that these days came to be a holiday, a day of merrymaking and feasting, an occasion for sending gifts to one another and for bringing presents to the poor. Mordecai and Queen Esther sent out another royal decree to the Jews of the kingdom to observe these days, the 14th and the 15th days of the month of Adar as festival days every single year. For these were the days on which the Jews were saved from their enemies, days that had been transformed from a time of grief and mourning to a time of celebration and joy. And since the wicked Haman, the enemy of all the Jews, had cast Purim, he had cast lots, to determine when the Jews of Persia would die, these days came to be known as the holiday of Purim. The decree was sent to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the realm of Hashverosh. The king himself came to be greatly respected by the Jews, and he was popular with all of his people. He acted with kindness and goodness as he ruled Persia with Queen Esther, relying on the wise advice of her cousin Mordecai. Queen Esther's decree to observe Purim was recorded in a scroll so that the festival of Purim would be celebrated by every generation of Jews, by every family, in every province, in every city around the world. And that concludes, what? Really? That concludes our reading of the Megillah. Hopefully those who wanted to get some candy had the opportunity. Those of you who did not want candy, I hope you did not get any. And if you did, I'm sure there's a small person who would be happy to take that off of your hands. In just a moment, we are going to continue with our celebration. We have two really wonderful things happening. The first is one that we're used to. The first is our Purim Carnival and dinner, which is put on by Tidy, our Temple Israel Dayton youth. And all of the proceeds will go to help them in funding some of the programs that they like to do. Not right now. The second, in Aleph, so in Bet and Gimel you will find dinner and the Purim Carnival, but in Aleph, those of you who are 21 and over are invited to join Teresa Winan and Ann Becker and all of those who helped to set it up for some wine and I believe some crafts and other fun things for the adults. So are those who are involved in Tidy here to tell me whether or not they're ready for people? Does anyone know if they're ready? I believe they're planning on us being there in about 5 minutes. If you have not returned your grogger, please do so. Otherwise, I want to give all of you a big hand for your beautiful and handsome costumes and also for your wonderful participation as we read the Megillah. You made it come alive. Thank you, and we'll see you in the other room. No, you already got chocolate. That's fine, it's not my concern.
Ethan, put the sound plug in a photo again.